Well, it looks like Brian Mast is trying to become the next Eye Patch McCain. Perhaps he wants to replace Eye Patch McCain, because I think no one has waved a bloody shirt this hard, possibly since Reconstruction. And amazingly, Brian Mast isn't even doing it on behalf of an overtly American war, as you would expect from the likes of Eye Patch McCain or the real John McCain. It seems like every time now that we see one of these guys come up who wants to use their military war wounds as a weapon, they have to be increasingly more obviously injured. And so John McCain, of course, famously was held in the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War. And so the story goes, he heroically elected to stay behind in the prison with his fellow soldiers when he was offered clemency by the North Vietnamese. And so John McCain was tortured. And because of that, for the entirety of his Senate career from the late 80s until the 2010s, when he, it was the 2010s. Yeah, he didn't live to 2020. Until the 2010s, when he eventually died of a brain tumor, John McCain used his bona fides as someone who was tortured in a war to shame anyone who disagreed or criticized any war thereafter. And then, like clockwork, after John McCain died, and John McCain lived his life as a war whore, he was the military-industrial complex's favorite senator. You know, every senator has their constituency. John McCain worked for the military-industrial complex. Joe Biden worked for the credit card companies. Other senators work for the banks or for the farmers. And some work primarily for Israel. And so that brings us to Brian Mast, who is not a senator, but he is a member of Congress. He's in the lower house. Just like Eye Patch McCain, Mr. Dan Crenshaw. I don't think I've even said his name during the video. I guess that's just how much the Eye Patch McCain nickname is stuck. And Brian Mast, though he is a war hawk and a gun grabber, you don't hear his name very often. But I guess this whole war in Gaza is where Brian Mast feels like he has a chance to make a name for himself. And so he wants to differentiate from the standard John McCain script by going all in on supporting Israel's war. And so that brings me to his comments this week and his attire. Mr. Mast, who I think he's from Port St. Lucie, or maybe Palm Beach, his district's along there. I can't remember. I feel like he originally was from West Palm, though. But anyway, he's a double amputee, okay? He lost his legs in the terror wars in Afghanistan. In a pointless, worthless war. I have no problem saying Brian Mast lost his legs for nothing. And I pity that. I think that's very sad. When I look at someone like Brian Mast, knowing that he walks around with 2 prosthetic legs, it reminds me why we need to get every single American out of the Middle East tomorrow, or yesterday. But Brian Mast does not see things that way. He likes to walk around in Congress wearing shorts, which, in case you were wondering, no, that is not standard attire. You're supposed to wear a suit in Congress. You're supposed to be a little classy. But hell, we know that the folks in Congress are not classy people. They are bad people. They're, in fact, some of the worst people on the planet, members of Congress. And so, of all the bad things that members of Congress do I think that wearing shorts is really the worst thing that you could do? No. But the reason why he wears shorts is to show off his prosthetics. And so this is how Brian waves his bloody shirt. Oh, and in case that was too subtle, he also wears an IDF shirt, like an IDF uniform on top. So he's wearing his IDF shirt and shorts. Actually, it's kind of, it's all short sleeves all around. It kind of reminds me of like what the Rhodesians used to wear. I don't know. Do the Israelis wear short sleeves all the time? I guess they probably do. It's hot there. So anyway, Brian Mast loves to show off his two missing legs as some sort of argument as to why we should support a war being waged halfway around the world by another country. Now, I should have checked if Brian Mast is a dual citizen. I lean towards saying no because, that would just be too perfect. If you had a literal Israeli citizen walking around in an Israeli uniform in Congress demanding that we send more money to Israel. Because that's too cartoonish, right? They wouldn't try that. Would they? But then again, I guess you do have Ilhan Omar demanding that we send more money to Somalia to conquer Ethiopia or something. Wasn't that her story this week? All these people friggin' suck. There is not one member of Congress, save for, well, there's a handful. There are the Tom Masseys of the world who actually represent American interests in Congress, but they're few and far between. I thought it was crazy when you had American members of Congress walking around with Ukraine flag lapel pins. Just a lapel pin with a Ukraine flag. I used to think that's absurd. They're wearing the flag of another country and they're supposed to represent America. And they're wearing that flag in Congress while they are trying to lobby their fellow representatives to send more and more billions of dollars to Ukraine. But now you have Brian Mast just straight up wearing an Israeli military uniform. He's gone full Zelensky for another country. And the most pathetic thing is, I would think a lot of his voters probably eat this up. And to a certain extent, I wouldn't begrudge them, supporting Israel or any other country in a foreign war that didn't concern us. If you just wanted to pick a side, personally, and you happen to like one side or another. As someone, I study, I always love studying history, and you read about wars in history. Sometimes you read enough about a war, you learn, or not learn, but eventually you grow to prefer one side or the other. You wish one side would have won, whether it's the side that ended up winning or if it's the side that lost. I bet there are a lot of Francophiles who wonder what might have happened, how differently history might have been had Napoleon III won the Franco-Prussian War. And so if you as an American hold that opinion and you say, gee, I like wearing, 19th century French military uniforms, and I really support the French cause in the Franco-Prussian War. I would not find that creepy. I would not think that you are subversive for holding those views. But it's a little different when our country is bankrolling the entire war and has completely enabled the war. Then I think I think that there's some room for debate there. And it's not a debate that Israel supporters, by and large, are willing to have. There was Brian Mast exchanged some words with Medea Benjamin of Code Pink this week, which I will get to. And that was somewhat refreshing in and of itself, that he was willing to even speak to someone of a differing point of view. Because generally speaking, you don't get that from fans of Israel. Although they do like to do the whole, Ben Shapiro style thing of going up to some idiot college kid and completely mopping the floor with them in some impromptu debate by asking them basic questions that will exposed that they have little to no knowledge about the situation. But it would be just as easy for me to walk up to, if with a microphone if I wanted, to one of these BoomerCon, protests where they're waving Israeli flags and make them look stupid. But here you had Brian Mast, American ultra-Zionist, wearing his Israeli uniform and his short shorts, showing off his peg legs. Peg leg McCain. Why didn't I think of that initially? And you have Medea Benjamin, who's, say what you will about Code Pink. I know the right hates Code Pink, and that's fine. You don't have to like them. I don't know them personally, so I don't have a personal opinion of them one way or the other. But Medea Benjamin, from what I understand, she's a fairly intelligent and well-informed person. And so there's a clip of an impromptu interview that she tried to do in the hallways of Congress with Mr. Mast, in which she questions him, you could say confronts if you want, confronts him about Israel's brutality in Gaza. Specifically, a couple of metrics. She brought up the 500,000 people in Gaza who are starving because they're unable to get food in and out. It's not a safe area. They are under blockade. They are being besieged by Israel. And so there is not enough food to eat in Gaza for the people who happen to be there. And so she brought up that issue to Mr. Mast, I guess to see if it at all, how that works into his calculus of supporting Israel's ongoing war and opposing a ceasefire, which would create an opportunity to get some food into Gaza. And what did Brian Mast do? See, to me, this is very informative, and I applaud him for being willing to say this. He outright blamed the victims. He said, those 500,000 people who are starving in Gaza? Yeah, they wouldn't be starving if they rebelled against their government, had staged some kind of violent revolution, even though they're completely disarmed. Stage a violent revolution, hope you win, and then install a pro-Israel government who is willing to do whatever Netanyahu says, and then maybe we'll let you eat. And so he outright says it is the fault of every man and woman in Gaza that Hamas exists, and because they're not fighting them. And so and here's the thing, he's not saying, hey, if you rise up against Hamas and help us fight Hamas, and by us, of course, he would mean the IDF. He's wearing an IDF uniform, so I don't see why I should not consider him, consider the IDF to be his side. And so Brian Mast would say, we, the righteous Israelis, he's not saying we'll feed you if you help us fight Hamas. He's saying, no, you need to defeat Hamas for us. You need to organize yourselves, you 500,000 starving Gazans who can't even find food. You need to scrounge up some weapons, and you need to defeat this military group, this militia, this government, which has ruled Gaza for almost 20 years. And the Israelis have tried to defeat them before. They fail every time. So the IDF can't defeat these guys. The IDF has been unable to defeat Hamas. But a bunch of unarmed civilians are supposed to rise up, defeat Hamas, and then install a new pro-Israel regime, and then Israel might let them eat food. I know I kind of buried the lead there, but I really wanted to set the stage before we got to that, because that is such an absurd statement, even though that is the commonly held one. That is what supporters of Israel believe, and they don't see anything wrong with that. Like, they don't see that as like psychopathic. And here's the thing: if this was just an academic debate, and none of us had any stake in this war, you know what? Okay, I can think you're insane, and you're free to hold insane positions. But this is not an academic debate, because the United States is fueling this war. The United States is enabling this war, just like they enabled and fueled the war in Yemen for a decade. The United States is pumping billions of dollars into Israel and running interference for Israel on the international stage. And that is exactly why Brian Mast was wearing his IDF cosplay to Congress. It was to shill for Israel and to demand that we, the whole of the United States, all of us, support Israel and send them more money. It's one thing to hold an opinion like that that's rather extreme, but to not have the self-awareness to realize, hey, this is something that obviously a lot of people are going to have a problem with. I understand why people might not have the same opinion with me on this. But no, he's so confident that he thinks all of us should have to support it, not just emotionally, not just rhetorically, but financially. Oh, and that wasn't even the craziest thing he said. Medea Benjamin brought up how, in addition to the 27,000 people in Gaza who have been killed since the start of the war, remember, this was all over an attack by Hamas against Israel that killed, I think we were told, 1,000 people. That's a lot of people. Okay, 1,000 dead people. That's no joke. That's really bad. You know what's worse than killing 1,000 people? Killing 27,000 people and destroying half of all buildings in an entire polity, country, whatever you want to call Gaza. Half of Gaza is rubble, and 27,000 people are dead. There is no defending that. Whatever happened to Israel way back in fall of 2023, that's all been long buried, okay? It's like saying that Pearl Harbor justified the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's insane. There have been a lot of arguments made in favor of using atomic bombs to destroy Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But no one tries to say, with a straight face, that you can justify the destruction of those cities, as well as other cities in Japan, that you can justify them as revenge for Pearl Harbor. Because only 3,000 people died in Pearl Harbor. How many people died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Innocent civilians, by the way, not military folks. Although in the case of in Israel's case, they were civilians on both sides. But anyway, there is no debate at this point, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you can have it if you want. They have no argument. Here's the thing: eye for an eye is not even a good argument. That's a wrong argument, even if they wanted to make it. But they can't even make that. They can't even say, oh, well, it's revenge for the 1,000 people who were killed. You know, we killed 27,000. No, that's not how that works. It's like the worst butchers in history would think that that's excessive. And honestly, I think that this war could be the big turning point against Israel, because it is so bad that if you just bring up the numbers to someone who is just casually pro-Israel because they watch Fox News or CNN or something, there's not a lot to say unless you're a hardcore ultra-Zionist like Brian Mast. And you know what? I guess I could commend him for being able to keep up the shtick at this point, where we have reached levels of absurdity. But that's what it takes. Say what you will about the entire history of the conflict. Set all that aside. Look at what has transpired, starting with October the 7th to the present. Who's the bad guy here? Or should I say, who's the bigger bad? Who's the big evil? Who's the great Satan and who's the little Satan? You can be as, pro-Israel as you want, okay? There's no defending this. Israel lost the propaganda war the second that they started openly, like, citing Dresden. One of the worst, catastrophes in the history of warfare, the bombing of Dresden. And Israel, their representatives on TV, and I believe English-speaking media, diplomats, they cite that by my name and say, like, oh, yeah, this isn't anything out of the ordinary. It's just like Dresden. I mean, not even the infinitely cucked Germans at this point could take that lying down. So anyway, with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.